So, with the Broccoli family selling the James Bond franchise to Amazon, I want to talk about what I think is the best James Bond movie. This is going to be a very controversial take. I think it's my most controversial take. But the fact that so many people disagree with this, to be honest, makes me think that I'm correct. So, the best James Bond movie of all time, in my opinion, is Die Another Day. Again, people hate this James Bond movie, and I think that they hate this James Bond movie because they hate James Bond. After this movie, you saw the real leftward turn, and I don't mean like leftward, you could upward, downward, whatever turn you want, of the Daniel Craig James Bond, which I think completely destroyed the franchise. Because this Bond movie was a perfect Bond movie. Now, what I think is important to remember when evaluating Bond movies is there's a difference between a good movie and a good Bond movie, right? Like, the criteria by which you define a Bond movie is how good that movie is at being a Bond movie. Like, what does a Bond movie give you, and how good is it at delivering that thing to you, right? So, for example, you know, if you think about what's the best comedy of all time, right? I'm pretty sure, right. Like, if you decide what the best comedy is of all time, right? You don't evaluate that based upon how good the movie is, because you're probably going to get some like artsy, like really plot-driven film that's not that funny, but it's like a really good movie, right? That's not the best comedy of all time. The best comedy of all time is a movie that makes you laugh the entire film, right? Those are two different things, right? The best James Bond movie is a movie that delivers on the things that James Bond is supposed to deliver. What is that? It is a cool Bond. It is, a hot Bond girl, a cool car, and most importantly, and I think that this is critical, it is wacky and fun and, cool storytelling. It is telling a story in a way that is inventive and interesting and has cool elements that don't actually make a whole lot of sense, right? Like, the point of Bond is not to have great plot. It really isn't. The point of Bond is to have a great time and to have really awesome, fun plot elements that you don't see in other movies. So let's go through some of the elements that I think that make this such a great Bond movie. So the first element is I think that Pierce Brosnan is the third best James Bond. He just, I think in essence he's really the second best James Bond. I just think that Honor Majesty's Secret Service is such a great film, and it's literally the only movie that George Lazenby made. So like I think that he has to be put second just because he literally batted 1,000, which no other Bond did, not even Sean Connery. Now, Sean Connery batted 1,000 in his original 6-film Bond run, but then he came back with his movie, not Never Say Never Again, and then there was that movie in Las Vegas. Like, he's made some stinkers, right? But Pierce Brosnan, I think, just looks and acts the part of Bond. He's obviously like an incredibly handsome person. He's incredibly charismatic, and he also really walks that line between seriousness and campy, which is what you kind of need with James Bond. Like, the fight sequences are actually like fight sequences, but they're not too aggressive fight sequence. Like, this isn't John Wick. This is James Bond, right? So it's not like crazy orchestrated fight sequences, but it also isn't. And this is my big problem with. Wow, I can't believe I just forgot with Roger Moore. Wow, I can't believe I forgot Roger Moore's names. I'm not qualified to make this video. But that's the problem that I have with Roger Moore. So when they initially cast Sean Connery as James Bond, Sean Connery was like a bodybuilder in Scotland, like he had never really acted before. And what happened was they originally wanted, a couple of other like actual like famous Hollywood actors. Cary Grant was at the top of the list. But what Albert Broccoli said is, I think the exact quote was, "I don't want some mincing fairy to play Bond." Right? He wanted somebody with like aggression to be cultivated. The problem with Roger Moore, I think, as a James Bond, is that the fight scenes were a little bit too campy. Like, he was too much of like an aristocrat, so it was just these like ka-chow type fight sequences, and it really like wasn't that effective. Like, he really didn't do the action part Bond as good as he should have, right? So that was my big problem with Roger Moore, is that like they went. This is one thing they do a lot of the James Bond franchise. They go one way and then they go the other way for the next thing. So personally, I don't really love Roger Moore, but I think that if you talk about the James Bonds that have made multiple movies, I think that the clear one, two, three is Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan, Roger Moore. Timothy Dalton, I absolutely hate. I literally could barely watch his movies. But there were still James Bond movies. They still did what they were supposed to do. They just weren't particularly good. The best thing about Timothy Dalton, I think, and I'm going to get to this when I get to Daniel Craig, is that he just left, right? Like, we have two Timothy Dalton movies. It's like a blip in the franchise. He didn't we all kind of knew that Timothy Dalton wasn't good at what he was doing, so they just left, and he didn't stain the franchise at all. It was just like a blip, right? The problem with Daniel Craig is that he just completely ruined the James Bond franchise. I made another video about this. I'm going to link it in the comments. So I don't want to go too much into this, but one, they're way too serious. Two, he's crying like a bitch over a girl, which is something that James Bond is not supposed to do. And three, you have all these contrived storylines where everybody is related to one another, and you have all these types of things, which isn't what James Bond is. It's like a fun, campy ride. That's not what Daniel Craig did. He played it like it was supposed to be like a serious action movie, which I think is not what James Bond is, and he was terrible at it. Finally, David Niven, he's just there because he is clearly the worst James Bond, but Pierce Brosnan I think is a clear number three. If you want to do the category of James Bond actors who have been in at least three James Bond films, then the list is Connery, Brosnan, Moore, Craig. Okay, moving on. I think that Halle Berry, I think, is the fifth best Bond girl if I were to do a comprehensive ranking. So my number one Bond girl is Famke Janssen from GoldenEye. I think that she is clearly. I think I might just be a little bit biased because this was the first Bond movie that I've ever seen, so I have a particularly fondness for GoldenEye. But I think that she has this great. You have the fight scene in the sauna. She's incredibly sexy, incredibly charismatic. That is really what a Bond girl is supposed to be, in my opinion. Number two, I think Electra King. Number three, Ursula Andress. She's from Dr. No. She was the first Bond girl. And I think that she kind of set the standard for what a Bond girl is supposed to be. And you kind of have to give her flowers for that. And then fourth is Daniela Bianchi from Russia with Love. And I think that when you combine Ursula Andress and Daniela Bianchi, that is those two together are what the Bond girl are supposed to be. Electra King obviously subverted a little bit, so I think that because she ended up being a bad guy, so. If you want to knock Electra King for being a subversion and not being the actual thing, that's completely fine. You could put Ursula Andress and Danielle Bianchi as 1 and 2, and then Famke Janssen as 3, and then Electra King as 4. That's okay, but that personally, kind of is my ranking. And then I think that Halle Berry is a very clear number 5. Obviously this was peak Halle Berry time. She does the role extremely well. She's a great sidekick from Bond. I'm going to go into this at the end, but you kind of have this dual fight sequence, which is silly, but I like it at the same time, where it's a more empowering Bond girl who's actually actually a partner to Bond, not just somebody who's just kind of along for the ride to be hot. So that's why I think that she is a clear number 5. Just to dispel some people who I think are, because while doing this, I was looking at a lot of lists to see who other people rank very high. There are 4 people that are ranked really high in a lot of lists that I don't think are really good Bond girls. The first one is Diana Rigg. She was from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. this is like a weird complaint about this, I know, but like this is just like my problem with her as a Bond girl is that like, so she's the girl that like James Bond marries, like she's like the one Mrs. Bond, and like, really, her? It's like the Arrested Development joke, like her, like of all of these girls, this is the one that he marries. Like I know this is kind of like crass, but like James Bond's supposed to be a crass thing, so the fact that like she was actually, you know, like I think that Mrs. Bond should have been a lot hotter. Just to be crass about it. Eva Green, obviously as Vesper Lind. My problem with her again, as I mentioned with the Daniel Craig Bond movies, is that the dude is literally moping about this girl for like 6 movies or like 5 movies. Like I blocked out how many Daniel Craig movies there are. It's just terrible. So she literally, I mean, it's not her fault. Obviously, it's not Eva Green's fault, but like this storyline literally destroys the franchise, destroys Daniel Craig's films, and hopefully we can just forget it never exists. So Pussy Galore, my problem with her is that, and this is actually like this is a weird complaint to make about her. So the big problem with the Sean Connery movies, if you rewatch them, is that there was like a lot of raping going on. Like, there was almost like one sexual assault per film, and this isn't one of those like, oh, it was at the time, 1960s. Even so, like I'm shocked that like there wasn't more of a pushback onto it, because like what he did to Pussy Galore was like the textbook definition of like rape. Like he literally like beat the crap out of her, and then they had sex, and that's like what converted her. It's just like a really toxic storyline. And again, like I don't want to be, like my whole push with this James Bond video is that like you don't want James Bond to be too woke. Obviously, like that's not who he is. But like there is some even the people who hate wokeness the most can admit that there's like a kernel of truth to it, and the kernel of truth is that you probably shouldn't sexually assault people. So that's I know again it's a weird thing to knock her for, because like she was just playing the part, but like the fact that like that was a major plot point in that movie, I think is a real stain on that film, and honestly the James Bond franchise in general. And then finally, Ana de Armas. The reason why I'm not putting her, I love Ana de Armas, huge fan. She didn't really do anything in the film. It didn't really give her anything to do, so that's why she's not ranked higher. All right, let's move on to the cars. So this might be a controversial take, because I've actually seen a lot of lists put the Aston Martin. So it's the Aston Martin Vanquish, but it vanishes. People like joke that it's Aston Martin Vanish. People actually put it at like the bottom of the list, and the fact that it vanishes is obviously like really stupid. So like I'll give you that. For me, the reason why it's the 4th best car is honestly because I don't accept non-Aston Martins as Bond cars. The closest I'm willing to accept is a Lotus, but even that I don't really accept as a Bond car. So literally like 80% of the cars on the list I don't accept as Bond cars. So there's not a lot of competition, is what I'm saying. But let's go through it. Obviously the best Bond car, the prototypical Bond car, is the Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger, which is interesting because if you remember the movie Catch Me If You Can, he literally bought that car because it was from Goldfinger. Then you have the Aston Martin V8 from The Living Daylights, another Aston Martin DB5 from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then you have the Aston Martin V12 Vanquish. These I think are clearly the best cars because they're Aston Martins, and Bond drives an Aston Martin. So this is another controversial take, which is true, is that Madonna's song "Die Another Day" is the best Bond song by far. I think I really. So there is a close second. I'm gonna get into that in a second, but after this 1 and 2, there's not really a close third. So like, first of all, again, like you listen to the song, it's just a fun pop song, which again, that's what Bond is. Bond is fun. It's high tempo. It's a spy film. That's what we want. The fact that you have Madonna kind of like right before she fell off the cliff making the song, I think is like perfect in terms of like what you want from like the artist at that time. You don't want like an unknown artist, and you don't even really want an artist at the peak of their powers making the Bond song because it kind of seems below them. What you want is kind of like where Paul McCartney was at Wings at the time. That's kind of the perfect, place in someone's career to make a Bond song. But again, it's just like a really fun poppy song. The sequence where they do it is actually perfect because it's actually what they do is I'm gonna get to this in the plot is that this is actually like one of the good like cinematic aspects of the film. There are few, but the torture sequence in North Korea is the opening credits, and they have that song playing. So I think that's perfect. And also just like I think I'll Die Another Day is just like kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of like encapsulates the ethos of James Bond. It's just like, hey, do you want to die today? Nah, I'm okay. I'll die another day. Are you sure? Yeah, no, I'll die another day. Don't worry about it. Dying tomorrow, not today. Which is really, thinking about it, is like really like the perfect James Bond ethos. So now, some other songs that people put really high up there. So I love Skyfall as a song. I think it might be the best song that is a Bond song. But again, it's not I think it's a really bad as a Bond song. It's like sad. It's like this isn't what Bond. This isn't the ethos. This isn't the feeling that you're supposed to have. During a Bond song, right? It's kind of like if you had like an Avicii song during like a Holocaust movie. You're watching a Holocaust movie and someone's like, and you're like, this song seems bad. You're like, what, you don't like Avicii? It's like, no, I like Avicii. It's just, this isn't the right place for this song. And I kind of think the same thing as with Live and Let Die. Obviously, any song with Die in it, like, you get 15 points, as a Bond song. The problem, I think, with this as a song is that it's not really 100% the ethos of Bond. Like, Bond isn't Live and Let Die, isn't Carefree. It is, I'm gonna die another day, right? And then, we have some other songs, Carly Simon's Nobody Does It Better. Again, way too slow. No Time to Die, I think, is fucking terrible. I hate this song. And then, License to Kill, I think, is, again, not like enough of a poppy song. My second best Bond song, in my opinion, is the Jack White and Alicia Keys, Another Way to Die. Again, have the word die, automatic 15 points. But, another trigger finger, in service of your majesty, right? And then you just have like a bunch of different things that could kill you. I think it's a little bit, too bluesy, I think. That's the only reason why it gets number 2, is that if it's a little bit too Jack White-ish. If they put the bluesiness down just a little bit, I think it might be number 1, but Another Way to Die, I think, is clearly the second best Bond song. Again, like, it just, like, I think that, like, with a Bond song, you kind of have to think about, like, what would be, like, the best way to think about it, I think, would be, like, what is the best song to put to a fight/chase scene? And do you really want to watch a chase scene with Skyfall? No, but, like, Another Way to Die is a great song to listen to a chase scene. Alright, so best M. Clearly, I think Judi Dench is the best M. Typically, I would theoretically object to the idea of an M being as involved in the story as she is. Like, M typically, like, it was not actually, like, a part of the plot. It was just, like, you meet M, and then you start your adventure. She really changed M in that, like, she became, like, a critical part of the story, especially in the Daniel Craig films, but, even so with the Pierce Brosnan films. And, like, again, typically I wouldn't like it, but I actually think she does a really good job at it, and it's a nice change for the character. I actually don't remember the actors for the other two M's. I really should, but I don't. And then Ralph Fiennes, I think he just kind of looks creepy. Um, Now, I think that besides having the best M, you also have the best Q, which is John Cleese. Um, Desmond Llewellyn, I think, yeah, Llewellyn is his name. He was kind of the Q for the most amount of time, and he was the Q in Goldfinger. But I think that John Cleese, in my opinion, was like the best Q because he has that comedic background, and is able to like add that to the mix. If you look over here, very small is Ben Whishaw because I hate Ben Whishaw as a Q. Like you had that line from I think it was Skyfall where it's just like, you know, uh, where he gives Bond the gun and Bond's like, "Is only this?" And he's like, "What were you expecting? An exploding pen?" Yeah, I was expecting an exploding pen. Again, like Bond films are supposed to be formulaic. They're supposed to do a certain thing, and having the nice 2 to 3 minutes of a movie where you show a bunch of cool, funny gadgets is awesome. And why would you take that out of the film? Why? It's fun. People enjoy it. And then finally, like I think a cool thing about the Q scenes as well that people don't really like. I think, you know, um, appreciate enough is how, one fun thing about the Q scenes is thinking like how are, you know, how is this going to impact the plot? You know what I mean? Like what? How is he going to take this thing that he just showed me and use it later? So I think that John Cleese is the best Q. All right, so now let's go to the plot review, which I think is kind of the last part of this video. I think the best thing about this movie is just how wacky and crazy the entire plot is. Like just how unhinged it is. Again, this is a Bond film. We're supposed to have fun. You're not supposed to like ask questions. And if you ask questions, it's supposed to be in a funny way. You know what I mean? Like, so we start off, dude fucking kite surfs into North Korea. I actually think that this fifth one might be incorrect. I think he just surfs into North Korea. And then, he witnesses a deal go down. And then we have this car chase, but with hovercrafts, which again, incredible. And then we have this torture scene, not that incredible, but again, with the song is great. For some reason, he goes to China for like 2 minutes, which is, again, inexplicable nature of Bond is what makes the movies great. And then he's in China for 2 minutes, and then he goes to Cuba, and then he meets Halle Berry. He has a fight with a bad guy in like a genetic clinic, and then he has another fight with another bad guy who turns out to be the same bad guy in a British club. If I remember correctly, for some reason, like I couldn't find a video to verify this, but I'm pretty sure Graves parachutes in to the club, which I think makes, is one of the coolest entrances of a villain. Like anytime you have somebody parachuting into something is going to be a fun time. Then we have Rosamund Pike, who later becomes really famous in Gone Girl. You find out that like these two guys are actually the same. Then for some reason we have a fucking ice fortress, and then there's a lot of stuff that happens in the ice fortress, but the most awesome part is that you literally have this like car chase through Iceland, and then the running away from like a sunbeam laser, and then it ends with like a fight on a plane where the bad guy kills his father, and then as I mentioned, you have this like simultaneous fight between James Bond and Graves and Rosamund Pike and Halle Berry. But the funny thing about it is that like while you're watching, you're like, wait a second, there's no stakes to the Halle Berry fight, because if James Bond wins and she loses, I mean she dies, that sucks obviously, but like they still accomplish the mission. And then you obviously have the ending scene where they're having sex in Cuba. But like again, we just have unhinged plot points left and right. Like, James Bond is about scenes that you remember for the rest of your life, and I think you have an insane amount of those in this movie, and it's so much fun. It's just a fun movie. That's what makes it great. Anyway, one last thing I wanted to say is that, like, one critical thing about James Bond, I think, is that, like, it's not, like, the bad guys were never really Russia. The bad guy was some other guy, right? Like, for the best example, again, is from Russia with Love, when, like, it's Russia, like, the guy's plan is to get Russia and America to fight each other, right? So the fact that the bad guy kills his dad, who's the North Korean general, because the North Korean general like objects to this plan, I think is actually good because it ends up being like North Korea is not the bad guy. Because like the point of the Bond movies is not to demonize any country; it is to just have a good time. So I like that fact. But again, this is the most fun Bond movie. It's the most unhinged Bond movie. It has great elements, and you know, I'm sad that it was followed by the Daniel Craig shit